Alright, we're going to have one day to just kind of look over Chapter 5. I think that we understand most of the stuff, and again, for the stuff that we don't, I think that if you just try today and actually study this sheet, that you can actually get ready for your final on. There are some of you who have failed in the third quarter, and I think it's mostly because of your Chapter 5 tests. So some of you, I'll be coming around and let you know that you'll be taking the test tomorrow. So again, if you study this sheet here, it's actually got the majority of the test questions that you have on the test. And so if you can pass that test tomorrow, then it'll actually help you out and potentially take that F away for your third quarter, at least get you closer to getting that F going away for your third quarter, or at least give me a chance to give you some extra credit or a little bit of push so you don't fail for the semester. First question, or one of the questions, talks about somebody having money in the bank account and that they take out, or the question that you usually see has to do with deducting. Remember that means you're actually losing 35. Remember, that's not a positive 35. Also remember that this is the one where you start out with y equals, because you want to know how much is in the account after x weeks. So again, 600 is in the account to start, and you are taking out 35, which means you put minus 35x. So again, with this question, you have 600 and you are taking 35 per week. Every week, I guess is how you would say that. So every week would be like 35 per week for your equation there. The equation y equals 6 plus point, or negative 6 minus 0.45x represents the profit after selling x cups of lemonade. What is the initial value? What's the rate of change? If you remember the formula y equals mx plus b, you don't need to write this part of it unless you want to study it. But if you remember the y equals mx plus b, the m was your slope or rate of change, and b was your initial value. So if you're asking for your initial value, that's pretty much your starting point. Where did you start? And of course you started with 6. Your rate of change is kind of like your slope, and so with that you're looking at the number that's attached to x. So again, rate of change is attached to x. It would be 0.45. So again, I think that's 2 easy points to get as long as you study that and try to figure out which one's which. We talked about slope a little bit in Chapter 4, but not with 2 points. And again, what you want to remember to do is to start out by making a table, putting the first point in. So 10.4 goes into the first slot, 7.10 goes into the second slot. The formula for slope, again, you don't need to write this, but you can if you think it'll help, is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And so what you end up doing is, these are your y's, here's your second y, here's your first y. So you end up doing y minus y, so 10 minus 4 over x2, which this is your second x, over x1, or minus x1, so 7 minus 10. You then, if necessary, grab your calculator and work out the top. So 10 minus 4, which is 6. I don't think we needed the calculator, but I'm just kind of showing you that. Then you do 7 minus 10, which is negative 3. And the last thing you do is divide. So 6 divided by negative 3, which is negative 2, as your answer there. So again, finding the slope isn't really that hard as long as you remember to put the 2 points into a table. Remember that it goes y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. Write those 2 parts there. Make sure you are subtracting your y and your x, because if they throw a negative your way, it can get confusing. And other than that, just make sure you take your time while typing it in. Same thing, this is also finding the slope. So again, the first thing you want to do is make a table. Negative 3.74, negative 7.40. And again, the formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And so that's your second y minus your first y, so 0 minus 4 on top. That's your second x minus your first x, so negative 7.4. And here's where you want to be careful, minus negative 3.7, because again, you are subtracting that. So it's negative 7.4 minus that number there, so there's your double negative. 0 minus 4, as we know, is negative 4, but you could verify that for yourself by doing it here. The other thing, you just got to be careful on typing. So negative 7.4 minus negative 3.7. Again, I hope you're practicing this stuff if you know you failed the third quarter, because this will probably help you out. And then in the end, you do negative 4 divided by negative 3.7, and you get 1.08 as your answer there. Alright, So again, you're going to see this kind of question on the test. Actually, every question that's on here you're going to see on that test tomorrow. So again, if you're trying to make sure you don't get an F for that third quarter, just make sure you write this stuff down, practice as you're going, and bring over your paper and ask me about it if you need a better explanation. You don't need to bring the computer because I know what I'm talking about, but if you bring me the question and ask me about whatever it is you're having an issue with, I can try to explain it to you. Graph y equals negative 3x plus 2. Remember that this tells us to go up 2 and put a dot. And remember that this is your slope, and negative 3 as a fraction is negative 3 over 1, which means that what we're supposed to do is put our pencil on the dot first and act like we're playing Monopoly or any kind of board game where you count down 3. Again, you don't start here, you start from the jump. So if your piece was here, you would go 1, 2, 3 jumps down, 1 jump over, and then draw your line again all the way across that region. Alright. Number 5, y equals 4/5 x minus 3. 4/5 x minus 3, again, this piece right here is telling us to go down 3 because of that minus 3. So you start from the origin, go 1, 2, 3 jumps down. The 4/5 is telling us to jump up 4. So again, pencil on the point first. 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps over. Draw your line through both of those points. That would be your graph for that actual problem. Alright. Booster Club is selling hats for 7, tiles for 5. The following equation represents the sales from last night's game. Here's where you need to make sure you understand what's going on here. The X does not represent the cost of hats or the cost of towels or the cost of anything, because the cost of hats is actually 7. The cost of towels is actually 5. So the X represents, if I paid 7 per hat, it would be the number of hats for $7. So yes, it would be the number of hats. Because if hats are sold for 7 and 7 is attached to X, then it would be the number of hats. The Y, again, if towels are being sold for 5 and 5 is attached to Y, then it would be the number of towels. And then the 115, you're talking about sales. I sold so many hats for 7, so many towels for 5. This is the total earned, because you made money off of that, you made money off of that, and that would be how much you have altogether when everything is said and done. Number 7 talks about nating, selling charms and bands. Write an equation represents the number of charms and bands that can be purchased for 15. If you want to do it with using the actual part, again, she's selling charms for 3, so it would be 3C. She's selling bands for 2, so you would add 2B. And again, that's the total amount of money you have for 15. Or you could put 3x plus 2y equals 15. Either one of those works, as long as you understand that charms would be your x and y would be your bands. It's kind of like the opposite part of what you just saw there. 3 is attached to x. Charms are 3, so x of course represents charms, just like up here. 7 was attached to x, and 7 was your hats, which means that x represented your number of hats, and so on. So again, it kind of goes forward and backwards on those two questions. Again, just make sure you are studying that if you had an F in the third quarter, so I can try to help you to get out of this class and not have to come back here again next year. This, if you remember, is not the y equals, and so what we're doing here is this one we have to actually ignore the y and see that it's going to be 2x equals 6, which means that x, if you divide 6 by 2, x is equal to 3. And again, that is your x-axis, so you go over where 3 is, which is right here, and put your dot. You then ignore your x, which puts you here. Again, don't ignore the negative, because the negative belongs to the 3. So your second part would be negative 3y equals 6, which when you divide by negative 3, you end up with y equals negative 2, which means go down 2. And again, with those 2 points, draw your line all the way across the region and get that right. For x plus 5y equals 10. Here, again, this is not a y equal, so you ignore y and see that 4x equals 10, and you divide by 4. In my brain, I can't think of what 10 divided by 4 is, so I grab my calculator and type it in to get 2.5. Don't forget 2.5 means full jump, and a 0.5 means half, as you know. So a half jump there. Then you ignore your x getting 5y equals 10, which means that y is equal to 2. Again, because that's positive, we're going to go up. And then from there, you draw your line connecting both of those parts into one line. All right. Another topic on your test tomorrow. Again, I don't think any of this is really tough. You just have to make sure you study it. Write the equation of a line with slope of 7 and y-intercept of -3. Remember that slope is m, that y-intercept is b, and that you use the formula y equals mx plus b. And so all you have to do is put y equals, if slope is 7, you put 7x minus 3, and that is your answer. Again, in this situation, we know the slope is 7, we know the y-intercept is -3, and that is all it's asking you to do. 11 goes a little bit further. It still wants the equation, so we still think about the y equals mx plus b. They give us a slope of 3, which is your m, but they don't give us b, they give us a point. If you remember, that is your x and that is your y. Again, you might want to write that for yourself even whenever you're doing it, and then plug in your numbers. So 10 is y, m is 3, x is 2, and then you solve it from there. Once you get your b, or your y-intercept, that is now where you take your slope and your y-intercept and put them back into your formula. So 3x plus 4 would be your answer there. And the beauty of it is that you can check it by taking this 2, plugging it in here. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 4 makes 10, which is what y is, and we see that it works just by plugging that answer back in. And then number 12 takes you all the way through it, because it doesn't give you a slope or a y-intercept, but remember that you can find slope by doing what we did to start this worksheet. Take the first point, 8, 3, put it here. Take the second point, 6, 7, put it here. 7 minus 3 on top, 6 minus 8 on the bottom. That ends up being 4 over -2, which is -2. Again, use your calculator to verify that if you need to, but I'm not going to go through that because I think we already talked about it. So after that, what you do is, again, that is your m. Now you have to pick a point, which I usually just pick the first one. We write our y equals mx plus b. We plug in our y, which in that case is 3, if you remember, because that's the second point. M, as we saw, was -2. X in this problem is 8 plus b. 3 equals -16 plus b, and from here again, use your algebra to work it out. So we add 16 to both sides, getting 19 for b, and in the end, we put the m and the b back into the problem. So -2x plus 19. And again, the beauty of it is I can take that formula and plug in my numbers. So 8, 3, I can put a -2 parentheses 8 close plus 19, and I should get 3 as an answer, which you see that I do. And then I can go back up here, remember to copy and paste by using the arrow, change my 8 into a 6 because that's what the other x is, and if this works out I should get the answer of 7, which you see I do, which means that the answer does work. So you can always check your answer on those by just taking your x, plugging it in, and seeing if it matches for y. 13, what's the rate of change? You got to remember that rate of change is what we call rise over run. And then you've got to remember that you just need to pick any 2 points. I usually pick 2 points that are close to each other. Typically I like to start from here or here, and then again you want to move to the right whenever you do it. So I will pick this point and that point. And what I would do is, again, start from the leftmost point, the one that's furthest back. My rise number here is going down, which means it's a -1 because I went down 1, and my run is 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I want to do to be sure everything is right is put my 1/4 into a fraction and make sure it stays -1/4, which it does. Because what a lot of you are doing is you're getting an answer. For example, let's say it was 3 over 6, is you're putting down 3 over 6, but if you put 3 over 6 into your calculator, you recognize that 3/6 turns into 1/2, and that's where some of you lost points there. Alright, so again, just remember slope is rise over run, so count your up and down value, then count your left-right value, put those two into the fraction, and that is it. Again, this is rise over run. It's only 2 points, so we start back here. Our rise this time goes up 1, 2, which is a positive. It goes over 1, 2, 3 jumps. So again, 2 jumps up, 3 jumps over would be a slope of 2/3. And again, just to verify, put 2/3 into your calculator to make sure it stays 2/3. C. This is the one where you talk about zero versus undefined. In this case here, remember that I can stand on this, and that if I walk on this, I'm not going to move up at all, which means that my slope or my rate of change is not going to change at all. That means the slope of this is 0. Now, the one that we haven't shown, or that we did not show on this, is the line that goes this way. And if you remember, I told you really can't stand on that line. This is the one that is undefined if you ever see that. So again, the vertical line is undefined because you can't stand on it. The flat line is 0 because you can stand on it. So just keep that in mind. And then the last one on this was the one that's tricky. If you look carefully, you'll see that it's counting 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, which means that each of these jumps, each half jump is actually 1. And so what you do is you count your half jumps, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 jumps. Again, if you look at your paper, put your pencil on the point of the paper and take half jumps, you should notice you go in halves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up. And again, you have to go halves because again, this is counting by 2, so you would go 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, counting halves, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And that would be your slope is 7/4. Again, checking 7/4 in your calculator, recognizing that it stays 7/4 is fine. Now again, for those of you who go the other way, who take your full steps, you go 1/2, and then 1, 2, 3.5, and then over 2. If you were to type that into your calculator like I'm trying to tell you to do, and convert that into a fraction using that conversion button, don't forget about that, you actually get your 7/4 that way. But either way, the answer to this is 7/4. You want to make sure you understand that. And then the very last question, which is also on your test for next week, so make sure you pay attention to this, talks about a number of mistakes a piano player makes. It gives us a scatter plot. Now, if you remember what a scatter plot is, it's just a plot of things that we actually saw people do. So this person here practiced for 2 hours and made about close to 70 mistakes. This person here practiced for 5 hours, made about 50 something mistakes, 6 hours, and so on. So these points are actual points of an experiment where they kept track of it. The line represents what you would expect. So again, the line is where your answer comes from. So when it says how many mistakes do you expect the student to make after 14 hours of practice, again, it's expect. It's not how many did they make after 14 hours. So you don't go to the 14 and say this is what they did. You go to the 14 and say what does the line of expectation tell me? And this line goes over to about here, which if you notice is in between. If that's 20 and 40, that means that that's 30. So it's in between 30 and 40, which would be 35 mistakes. Again, you have to be able to understand you are not going to the dot. You are going to the line. Again, if I'm wanting to know how many after 12 hours, you would go from 12 up to the line. Follow this over and see it should be 40. If I want to know 9 hours, that's 9. So you go up to the line, not up to the part. But again, that's what you're looking at. You're following the line when you're talking about what you expect, and you just got to remember that when you see it again. So other than that, make sure you have this all completed and turn it in when you've done it. If you want to surf the net for a moment until we get things started, which everybody might be done by now, but if you want to surf the net for a little bit until that happens, let me know. But go ahead and hand this paper in so I know you're finished, and then I can keep an eye on where everybody's at. Other than that, that's it.